I'm Elaine Matthews, 34, and until last month, I was the engineering director at my family's company. For 12 years, I poured everything into Matthews Engineering Solutions, only to sit stunned as my mother pronounced me too expensive during our quarterly board meeting. My father couldn't even look at me. "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary." My younger brother Kyle smirked, tapping his presentation pointer against the spreadsheet. "Nothing personal, just cost-cutting." I silently packed my belongings and walked out. What I never expected was how quickly their desperate calls would begin. Before I continue with my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever been blindsided by family betrayal. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. I graduated from MIT with honors, clutching multiple job offers from tech giants that would have launched my career into the stratosphere. Google, Apple, and Microsoft all wanted me on their engineering teams, but there was never any real question about where I'd go. Matthews Engineering Solutions had been my father's dream for 30 years, and now it was mine too. Dad started the company in our garage when I was just 4 years old. I grew up watching him sketch designs at our kitchen table, his engineering notebooks filling our bookshelves. When I showed an early aptitude for mathematics and science, the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "You've got the Matthews engineering gene," he'd say, ruffling my hair. By the time I finished college, the company had grown from that garage operation to a respectable mid-sized firm specializing in industrial automation systems. We weren't huge, but we had carved out a solid reputation in the industry. Dad offered me an entry-level position, promising no special treatment. "You'll work your way up just like anyone else," he said. And I respected him for that. Those early years were grueling but fulfilling. I canceled dates to finish projects, worked weekends when deadlines loomed, and postponed vacations when clients needed immediate support. I was the first one in the office each morning and often the last to leave. My apartment was basically a place to sleep between workdays. The company wasn't just my employer, it was my identity. Through genuine merit and undeniable results, I climbed from junior engineer to project lead within 5 years. By year 7, I was heading the entire engineering department, managing a team of 28 talented professionals who respected my technical knowledge and leadership style. We functioned like a well-oiled machine, completing projects ahead of schedule and under budget. My crowning achievement came when I secured the Westbrook manufacturing contract, a 7-figure deal that transformed our company's trajectory. I spent months researching their operations, identifying inefficiencies, and designing a custom automation solution that would increase their productivity by 30%. When I presented my proposal to their executive team, they were so impressed that they signed on the spot, canceling meetings with our larger competitors. That night, Dad took me to dinner, just the 2 of us. "I always knew you were special, Elaine," he said, raising his glass. "This company will be your legacy someday." We stayed until closing, discussing future expansion plans and innovations. The connection between us had never felt stronger. Everything changed when Kyle joined the company 3 years ago. My younger brother had just completed his MBA and convinced our parents that the company needed his fresh business perspective. While I had been building our technical reputation, Kyle argued we needed to focus more on profit margins and growth strategies. At first, I welcomed his input. We had different strengths, and I thought we could complement each other. Dad seemed thrilled to have both his children involved in the family business, and Mother had always had a soft spot for her youngest. The Matthews Dream Team, Dad called us during Kyle's welcome dinner. But subtle shifts began occurring almost immediately. In meetings, my mother Diane would look to Kyle for approval after I spoke. When I proposed new technical directions, she would ask, "What does Kyle think about this?" before making decisions. I noticed Dad deferring to her more often, his own engineering background seemingly less valued than Kyle's business school theories. Despite these changes, I remained committed to our company's success. My team continued delivering exceptional work, and our client satisfaction ratings were at an all-time high. I believed that results would ultimately speak for themselves. I was wrong. The first concrete sign of trouble came during a strategy meeting 6 months after Kyle joined. I had spent weeks developing a proposal for expanding our engineering capabilities into renewable energy systems, a growing market where our expertise could be adapted with minimal investment. When I finished my presentation, the room fell into an awkward silence. "That's an interesting perspective," my mother finally said. "Kyle, didn't you mention something similar in your growth report last month?" Kyle nodded confidently. "Yes, I've been researching the renewable sector. I think we could make some adjustments to Elaine's proposal and make it work." I sat stunned as the conversation shifted, with Kyle essentially repackaging my ideas as his own while suggesting my approach needed refinement. My father, once my greatest champion, merely nodded along. When the Anderson Systems contract came up for bid, I worked nights and weekends preparing our proposal. Anderson represented the largest potential client in our company's history, and their project aligned perfectly with our team's expertise. After an exhaustive pitch process, we won the contract, a moment that should have been celebrated as my greatest achievement. Instead, at the announcement meeting, my mother praised the team effort, especially Kyle's financial models that made our bid competitive. In reality, Kyle had only contributed a small pricing spreadsheet that I had substantially revised. When the client specifically mentioned my engineering solutions as the deciding factor, my mother quickly added, "Elaine and Kyle make such a wonderful brother-sister team." The next week, I discovered Kyle had been assigned as the primary contact for the Anderson account, the account I had secured. When I questioned this decision, my mother dismissed my concerns. "Kyle has a better understanding of the business side. The client needs to see our strategic vision, not just technical details." Resources for my engineering department began dwindling. Budget requests that had once been routinely approved now required extensive justification. Equipment upgrades were postponed, and hiring freezes were implemented despite our increasing workload. Meanwhile, Kyle was authorized to expand the sales and marketing departments with minimal oversight. During a family dinner, I overheard my mother and Kyle discussing necessary restructuring in the hallway. When they noticed me approaching, they abruptly changed the subject. That night, my mother barely spoke to me, focusing her attention entirely on Kyle's recent golf tournament victory. Marcus Johnson, our senior electrical engineer and my most trusted colleague, pulled me aside after a particularly tense project meeting. "Something's happening, Elaine," he warned. "There are rumors about major changes coming to the engineering department. People are nervous." I dismissed his concerns, unable to believe my family would undermine the department that had built the company's reputation. "It's probably just budget season stress," I assured him. "Once the Anderson project is successfully launched, everything will settle down." The following week, I noticed my team's access to certain company files had been restricted. When I inquired about it, the IT manager uncomfortably explained that the directive had come from upstairs. Later that day, I saw Kyle exiting my father's office, looking particularly pleased with himself. That evening, I called my father to discuss my concerns directly. He sounded uncharacteristically distant, claiming he was too busy to talk about work matters and suggesting we discuss it later at the office. In 12 years, he had never been too busy for me. At our monthly family brunch, usually a relaxed affair, my mother spent the entire time discussing Kyle's recent presentation to the board, a meeting I had surprisingly not been invited to attend. When I asked about it, she vaguely mentioned confidential business planning and quickly changed the subject. Despite the mounting evidence, I couldn't bring myself to believe my family would betray me. I had literally built my life around Matthews Engineering Solutions. The company's success was my success. The clients trusted me. My team respected me. Surely my family recognized my value. So I doubled down, working even harder to prove my worth. I personally oversaw every aspect of the Anderson project preparation, ensuring all specifications exceeded expectations. I documented every contribution, every solved problem, every efficiency gained. I stayed positive in meetings, supported company initiatives, and avoided confrontation with Kyle. In retrospect, I was in denial about what was clearly coming. The signs were all there, but I refused to read them. The calendar invitation arrived late Thursday afternoon. Strategic planning discussion. Friday 4 p.m., main conference room. No agenda attached, no preparatory materials. Just my parents, Kyle, and me listed as attendees. Something about the timing felt ominous. Important decisions were rarely made at the end of a workweek, but I brushed aside my unease and prepared a quick update on our ongoing projects, just in case. When I arrived at the conference room that Friday, they were already seated, my mother at the head of the table, my father and Kyle flanking her on either side. The arrangement itself was telling. Throughout the company's history, my father had always taken the head position, with my mother beside him. This visual restructuring of family hierarchy sent a chill through me before a single word was spoken. Elaine, thank you for joining us. My mother began with a formality that felt completely foreign to our family dynamic. She was dressed in her most severe business attire, her expression impassive. We've been conducting a thorough analysis of our operational structure and expenses. My father stared down at his clasped hands, his usual warm demeanor completely absent. Kyle sat with perfect posture, a leather portfolio open before him, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. As you know, the business landscape is evolving. My mother continued in a rehearsed tone. Matthews Engineering Solutions needs to adapt to remain competitive. After careful consideration of our financial position and future projections, we've determined that certain structural changes are necessary. I nodded, still naively believing this was about departmental reorganization. I've actually been working on some efficiency improvements for the engineering team, I offered. I'd be happy to share my thoughts on how we can optimize our processes. My mother's expression didn't change. That won't be necessary, Elaine. The board has already reached its decision. The board, meaning my parents and Kyle. The three of them against me. Kyle took over, sliding a printed presentation across the table. If you look at the numbers, they tell a very clear story. He stood and pointed to a bar graph comparing departmental expenses. Engineering salaries represent our largest overhead, with your position being the most significant individual expense. He clicked to the next slide, which featured a pie chart with my salary carved out as a separate slice. Your current compensation package, including benefits, could fund 3 junior engineers with combined greater output potential. The room seemed to tilt as his words registered. This wasn't about reorganization. This was about me. We're eliminating your position, effective immediately, my mother stated flatly. The engineering director role will be restructured into multiple lower-level positions reporting directly to Kyle as COO. I looked to my father, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to acknowledge my 12 years of dedication. He briefly met my eyes, then looked away, his face a mask of discomfort. Dad, my voice cracked slightly. Do you agree with this? After an excruciating silence, he spoke without looking up. The numbers make sense, Elaine. It's a business decision. Kyle continued as if this emotional moment was simply another bullet point in his presentation. We've prepared a severance package that's quite generous. 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, and of course, outstanding vacation pay. He pushed a folder toward me. Legal has already drawn up the necessary paperwork. The premeditation struck me like a physical blow. While I had been working overtime to ensure the Anderson project's success, they had been meeting with lawyers to orchestrate my removal. But the Anderson project, I managed to say. The implementation begins next month. They specifically requested my involvement. I developed the entire system architecture. We'll manage the transition, Kyle replied dismissively. I've been shadowing you on this account, as you know. I've prepared detailed notes on all technical aspects. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Kyle had attended exactly 2 client meetings, spent most of them on his phone, and had asked me afterward to summarize the technical stuff because he had been focusing on relationship building. This is a mistake, I said firmly, finding my voice at last. My team respects me. The clients trust me. I've delivered consistent results for 12 years. I've sacrificed everything for this company. My mother's expression hardened. This kind of emotional appeal is exactly why we need more objective leadership, Elaine. Business decisions can't be based on sentimentality. Sentimentality? I echoed in disbelief. Is that what you call my track record of success? The Westbrook contract? The Peterson account? The industry awards our team has won. Kyle interjected smoothly, all achievements we value. But the company needs to evolve. It's simple mathematics. He tapped his pen against the spreadsheet. 3 junior engineers for the price of 1 director. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting. The casual cruelty of that statement, delivered with a smirk I'll never forget, finally made everything clear. This wasn't about business at all. This was a power play. And I had lost before I even knew the game had begun. I stood up slowly, gathering what dignity I could muster. I assume you'll want my office cleared out today. My mother nodded. HR has prepared boxes for your personal items. Your system access has already been updated. Of course it had. They hadn't even considered that I might fight for my position. I picked up the severance agreement without opening it. I'll have my lawyer review this. As I reached the door, Call called after me, "We'll need your building access card before you leave." I turned back one last time, taking in the tableau, my triumphant brother, my coldly efficient mother, and my defeated father, the man who had once told me this company would be my legacy. "Congratulations on your restructuring," I said quietly. "I hope it brings you everything you deserve." The walk back to my office felt surreal. Like moving through a strange dream where familiar surroundings suddenly become threatening. Colleagues I'd passed in these hallways thousands of times now watched with confused expressions as I moved past them, my face betraying the shock I couldn't hide. My office door, with its nameplate reading Elaine Matthews, Engineering Director, stood as a final monument to what I'd built and lost in a single afternoon. Inside, cardboard boxes had indeed been placed on my desk, an HR assistant hovering awkwardly beside them. "I can give you privacy," she offered, clearly uncomfortable with her assignment. "Thank you," I managed to reply, though I barely recognized my own voice. Word traveled fast. Before I'd filled my first box, Marcus appeared in my doorway, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Is it true?" he demanded, then lowered his voice when he saw my expression. "Elaine, they can't do this. The Anderson implementation is weeks away. The team won't accept this." I continued methodically emptying my desk. Family photos. Technical manuals. The award plaque from the Industrial Automation Association. Each item represented years of dedication now rendered meaningless. "It's done, Marcus," I said flatly. "Effective immediately. Kyle will be taking over." "Kyle?" Marcus didn't bother hiding his contempt. He wouldn't know a circuit diagram from a flowchart. "This is insanity." By then, several other engineers had gathered outside my office, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Jessica Chin, my brilliant systems architect, actually had tears in her eyes. These people weren't just colleagues, they were my professional family. More loyal than my actual family had proven to be. "I appreciate all of you," I told them, forcing strength into my voice. "It's been an honor working with this team. Please continue the excellent work you're known for." Marcus insisted on helping me carry my boxes to the car. In the parking lot, away from watching eyes, my composure finally cracked. Leaning against my car, boxes at my feet, I let out a shuddering breath that turned into a sob. "This isn't the end," Marcus said firmly, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "You're the best engineer I've ever worked with. Any company would be lucky to have you." 12 years, I whispered. 12 years of my life. The drive home passed in a blur of shock and disbelief. Traffic lights changed, other cars moved around me, but I barely registered any of it. My mind kept replaying that smirk on Kyle's face. 3 junior engineers for the price of 1 director. My apartment felt like a stranger's home when I arrived. I'd spent so little time there over the years, always prioritizing work over personal comfort. Now its emptiness seemed to mock me, no partner, few friends outside work, minimal personal possessions. I'd sacrificed everything for a company that had discarded me without hesitation. I didn't leave my apartment that entire weekend. Phone notifications accumulated concerned messages from team members, a few industry contacts who'd somehow already heard the news. I ignored them all, unable to formulate responses that wouldn't reveal how utterly devastated I felt. Sunday evening, my phone displayed a notification that twisted the knife further. A calendar reminder for the weekly family dinner I'd attended faithfully for years. Minutes later, a text from my mother. Given current circumstances, perhaps best to skip dinner tonight. Not even a personal call, just a cold text message excising me from another aspect of my life. Monday morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through blinds I'd forgotten to close. For the first time in 12 years, I had nowhere to go, no projects demanding my attention, no team looking to me for guidance. The disorientation was profound, like losing gravity itself. I finally forced myself to check my email, finding a message from our family company's HR department requesting I sign and return the severance agreement by Wednesday. The corporate letterhead, the logo I'd helped design years ago, felt like another betrayal. Several former colleagues had sent messages of support, including Jessica, who wrote, "The team is in shock." Kyle called a meeting this morning and announced he's taking over project management for Anderson. He couldn't answer basic questions about the system architecture. This is going to be a disaster. A part of me felt vindicated by this, but it offered little comfort. I'd invested too much of myself in Matthews Engineering Solutions to take pleasure in its potential struggles, even if those struggles validated my value. By Tuesday, desperation drove me to attempt reconciliation. I called my father's private line, the one he'd always told me to use for important matters. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Dad, it's me," I said after the beep. "I think we should talk about this decision. The Anderson project needs experienced oversight. Maybe we can find a compromise." My voice broke slightly. "Please call me back." He never did. With mounting anxiety about my financial situation, I finally opened the severance agreement. The terms were technically generous, as Kyle had claimed, but included a non-compete clause that would prevent me from working for any competing engineering firm for 18 months. They weren't just pushing me out, they were attempting to sideline me completely. That night, I calculated my financial runway. With my savings and the severance package, I could maintain my current lifestyle for about a year without income. It should have been reassuring, but instead highlighted how utterly unprepared I was for this sudden derailment. I'd been so confident in my position, so certain of my value, that I'd never seriously considered contingency plans. The most painful realization came when I tried articulating my professional identity without reference to Matthews Engineering. For 12 years, I'd been Elaine Matthews, Engineering Director at Matthews Engineering Solutions. The company name and my own had been intertwined, my personal and professional identities inseparable. Now, I was just Elaine. The emptiness of that thought kept me awake until dawn. On Wednesday, another family member finally reached out, my Aunt Susan, my father's sister, who had always maintained a respectful distance from the family business. "I heard what happened," she said when I answered her call. "It's unconscionable, Elaine. James and Diane are making a terrible mistake." "Did Dad send you to check on me?" I asked, hope briefly flaring. Her hesitation told me everything. "No, honey. I don't think he knows I'm calling." That confirmation of my parents' complete abandonment was somehow worse than the firing itself. They hadn't just eliminated my position, they'd excised me from the family with surgical precision. I declined to sign the severance agreement by the deadline, instead forwarding it to an employment attorney recommended by a former college classmate. His assessment was blunt. While the termination was legally permissible in our at-will employment state, the non-compete clause was potentially unenforceable given the circumstances. He advised negotiation rather than immediate litigation. By the end of that first awful week, the emotional fog began to lift, replaced by something I hadn't expected: clarity. I'd defined myself by my contribution to the family business for so long that I'd lost sight of my own value independent of that context. If my family couldn't recognize what I brought to the table, perhaps it was time to set a different table entirely. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo of job searches and sleepless nights before my phone rang with my father's number. I stared at it for 3 rings, tempted to ignore it as he had ignored me, before curiosity overcame pride. Elaine. His voice carried none of its usual confidence. How are you? Really? I replied flatly. That's how we're starting this conversation. He cleared his throat. I'm calling about the Anderson specifications. The team is having some difficulty interpreting your documentation. Of course. Not a call to apologize or reconcile, but a call because they needed something from me. I let the silence stretch uncomfortably. The implementation deadline is approaching, he continued hesitantly. Kyle thought perhaps you could clarify some technical details. Kyle thought. I echoed incredulously. The same Kyle who was confident enough to take over my position? The same Kyle who could supposedly handle all the technical aspects himself. Elaine, please. This is business. Exactly what I was told when I was fired. Nothing personal, just business. After extracting a promise that he would reconsider the non-compete clause, I walked him through the basic architecture questions that any competent engineer would have understood from my meticulously prepared documentation. His confusion confirmed what I had suspected. Kyle was completely out of his depth. The next day, Jessica called during her lunch break. It's chaos here, she whispered. Kyle tried presenting the Anderson implementation plan to the team, but he couldn't answer fundamental questions about load balancing and failover procedures. Marcus finally took over the meeting just to stop the embarrassment. How are the preparations going otherwise? I asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than vindicated. We're already behind schedule. Kyle keeps changing requirements based on cost rather than functionality. The test environment crashed twice yesterday because he approved configuration changes without understanding their impact. Similar reports trickled in over the following days. Marcus called to vent about equipment orders being denied. Another engineer texted that Kyle had shortened the testing phase to meet deadlines, compromising quality assurance protocols we had always maintained. 3 weeks after my departure, Jessica asked if I would meet her for coffee. When I arrived at the cafe, her exhausted appearance told its own story before she spoke a word. The Anderson demonstration is scheduled for next week, she said, stirring her untouched coffee. We're nowhere near ready. The integration points are failing, the user interface is riddled with bugs, and Kyle is in complete denial. What's my father saying about all this? I asked. That's another problem. Your father seems absent. He comes to the office, but he's not really engaged. Your mother and Kyle are making all the decisions. I felt a twinge of concern for my father despite everything. He had always been passionate about our projects, involved in every major development. This disengagement wasn't like him at all. 4 days later, my phone rang again, this time unexpectedly. It was my mother. Elaine, she began without preamble. I understand you've been in contact with current employees about ongoing projects. Hello to you too, Mom, I replied. I've spoken with friends who happen to be colleagues. Is that a problem? It's inappropriate for you to be discussing confidential business matters after your departure. I didn't realize catching up with friends was against company policy. Perhaps you should add that to the employee handbook. My newfound ability to push back surprised even me. She paused, clearly recalibrating. The Anderson demonstration has been rescheduled. Kyle mentioned you provided some clarification to your father about the specifications. Dad called me with questions. I answered them. That's all. Another pause. Would you be willing to consult on the project? Just until implementation is complete. We could arrange appropriate compensation. The request was so audacious that I actually laughed. Let me get this straight. You fire me for being too expensive, then want to hire me as a consultant to fix the problems created by my absence. This is a professional courtesy request, Elaine. The success of this project affects people you worked with for years. She was right about one thing. I did care about my former team and the reputation they'd helped build. But returning as a consultant would only validate the decision to replace me. I'm afraid I'm unavailable for consulting work at this time, I replied with deliberate formality. Perhaps one of those 3 junior engineers can help. The next day, Marcus called with breaking news. The Anderson demonstration had been an unmitigated disaster. The system had crashed within minutes, key features had failed, and the client representatives had walked out midway through the presentation. Cole tried to blame the engineering team. Marcus reported, his voice tight with anger. Said we hadn't followed his directions properly. But the client's CTO specifically asked why you weren't involved. Said they'd selected us largely based on your previous work. That evening, my father left 3 increasingly desperate voicemails, each one more pleading than the last. The final one simply said, "Elaine, we need to talk. The company is in trouble. Please call me back." I didn't. Instead, I met with Marcus at his apartment the following day. He had taken a personal day, something I'd rarely seen him do in our years working together. "I can't do this anymore," he declared, pacing his living room. "Kyle is destroying everything we built. Your mother backs every ill-informed decision he makes. For people from the engineering team have already submitted resignations. What about the Anderson contract?" I asked. "They've given us 2 weeks to demonstrate a working system, or they're pulling out and pursuing legal remedies for breach of contract." He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "Elaine, this isn't just about you anymore. The whole company could go under." Part of me, a small, vindictive part one wasn't proud of, thought that might be fitting justice. But too many innocent people would be affected. Engineers who had trusted my leadership, support staff who depended on their paychecks, clients who relied on our systems. "What do you think I should do, Marcus?" I asked quietly. His answer surprised me. "Nothing. At least, nothing to help them directly." He sat down across from me, leaning forward intently. "I think you should start your own company." Marcus's suggestion hung in the air between us, simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Start my own company? The thought had fleetingly crossed my mind during sleepless nights, but hearing it voiced aloud made it suddenly, tangibly possible. "I'm serious," Marcus continued, his expression more animated than I'd seen in weeks. "You have the technical expertise, the industry connections, and now you have the perfect motivation." "And what about capital?" I countered. "Client relationships? Office space? All the infrastructure that took Matthews Engineering decades to build. You wouldn't be starting from zero," he insisted. "You'd be starting with an advantage they've foolishly discarded you." Over the next few days, the idea took root and began to grow. I created spreadsheets analyzing startup costs, market positioning, and competitive advantages. I researched small business loans and consulted with a business attorney about my obligations under the severance agreement I still hadn't signed. When I tentatively shared the concept with Jessica during another covert coffee meeting, her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "I'd follow you in a heartbeat," she declared. "And I'm not the only one. Half the engineering department would jump ship if you offered them positions." "I couldn't possibly hire that many people immediately," I cautioned. "Maybe not. But even a small team of the right people could make an impact quickly." She leaned forward. "The Anderson contract isn't the only one in jeopardy. The Henderson project is coming up for bid next month, and rumor has it they're hesitant to work with Matthews after hearing about the Anderson fiasco." The mention of the Henderson project sparked something in my mind. Henderson Industrial Systems was a company I'd cultivated a relationship with for years, waiting for the right moment to pursue their business. Their upcoming factory automation project would be substantial, exactly the kind of work my team excelled at. That evening, I made a call that would change everything. Alexandra Reed had been my classmate at MIT before becoming a successful venture capitalist specializing in engineering and technology startups. We'd kept in sporadic contact over the years, occasionally meeting at industry conferences. "Elaine Matthews," she answered warmly. "This is an unexpected pleasure." Over the next hour, I shared my situation with ruthless honesty, my firing, the family betrayal, and my emerging plan to establish a competing engineering firm. Rather than expressing sympathy, Alexandra asked penetrating questions about market positioning, potential clients, and technical differentiation. "Send me a business plan by Monday," she said finally. "This has potential, Elaine. Significant potential." The weekend passed in a blur of spreadsheets, market analyses, and strategic planning. By Sunday night, I had produced a 30-page business plan outlining my vision for Elaine Matthews Engineering, a name chosen deliberately to leverage my personal reputation in the industry. Alexandra's response came Tuesday morning. Let's meet. I'm prepared to discuss initial funding of $1.5 million for a 20% equity stake. The figure stunned me. It was more than enough to lease modest office space, purchase necessary equipment, and cover operating expenses while pursuing our first contracts. More importantly, it was a vote of confidence from someone whose business judgment I deeply respected. Within 2 weeks, I had secured a small office suite in a building across town from Matthews Engineering. The space needed renovation, but its industrial aesthetic suited my vision for a company that valued substance over appearance. Marcus was the first to officially join, resigning from Matthews with a notice period calculated to end just as our office would be ready. Jessica followed a week later. Within a month, 5 key members of my former team had committed to joining Elaine Matthews Engineering upon completion of their notice periods. The local business journal published a small article about the new venture, describing it as founded by former Matthews Engineering Director Elaine Matthews, bringing over a decade of industry leadership experience. The publicity, minimal though it was, reached exactly the audience I had hoped for. 2 days after the article appeared, I received a call from William Henderson himself. "Ms. Matthews," he began, "I've followed your work for some time. Your solutions for Westbrook manufacturing particularly impressed me. I understand you've started your own firm." "That's correct, Mr. Henderson," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. "We're currently accepting bids for our factory automation project. Given recent concerns about Matthews Engineering, we're expanding our search for potential partners. Would your firm be interested in submitting a proposal?" It was the opportunity we needed, a chance to establish immediate credibility in the industry. The timing was challenging. We were still setting up our infrastructure, and most of my team was serving notice periods at Matthews. But some opportunities are too important to decline. "We would be honored to submit a proposal," I told him. "When is your submission deadline?" 3 weeks from Friday, he replied. I should mention that Matthews Engineering will also be bidding. I hope that doesn't create any awkwardness. Not at all, I assured him, though my stomach tightened at the thought of directly competing against my family so soon. "We'll focus on creating the best possible solution for Henderson Industrial." For the next 3 weeks, I lived and breathed the Henderson proposal. Working evenings and weekends with Marcus and Jessica, who took vacation days to help, we developed a revolutionary approach that leveraged my intimate knowledge of the industry's pain points and technical limitations. Rather than simply automating existing processes, the standard approach that Matthews would likely propose, we designed a predictive maintenance system using machine learning algorithms to anticipate equipment failures before they occurred. The potential cost savings were substantial, and the technical innovation would position Henderson at the forefront of their industry. The night before the submission deadline, as we finalized our proposal documents, Marcus looked up from his computer with an expression of quiet amazement. "Do you realize what we've accomplished in just a few weeks?" he asked. "This proposal is more innovative than anything we produced in the last 2 years at Matthews." Jessica nodded in agreement. "There's something different about how we're working now. More collaborative, more creative." I understood exactly what they meant. Without the constraints of Kyle's cost-cutting measures and my mother's risk aversion, we were free to pursue genuinely innovative solutions. The work felt joyful again, reminiscent of my early days in engineering when possibilities seemed limitless. We submitted our proposal the next morning, celebrating afterward with champagne in our still half-furnished office. Whether we won the contract or not, we had proven to ourselves that Elaine Matthews Engineering was a viable entity with a distinctive approach. 2 weeks later, William Henderson called personally to inform us that we had won the contract over 3 competing bids, including Matthews Engineering. "Your solution showed a level of innovation and technical insight that frankly wasn't present in the other proposals," he explained. We're excited to work with your team, Ms. Matthews. The contract wasn't as large as the Anderson project, but it provided exactly what we needed: legitimate revenue, industry recognition, and validation of our approach. More importantly, it represented my first significant victory as an independent business owner rather than a family employee. Word spread quickly through the industry about the new firm that had beaten established companies for the Henderson contract. Several former clients reached out to inquire about our services. 2 more engineers from my old team submitted their resignations to Matthews, asking to join us. 6 weeks after winning the Henderson contract, we delivered our first implementation milestone ahead of schedule and under budget. The client was delighted, providing a glowing testimonial that we prominently featured on our newly launched website. By then, our small office hummed with activity. The core team of 7 engineers had established a collaborative culture that attracted additional talent. We were lean but efficient, focusing on high-value projects rather than volume. When an industry newsletter published a profile of emerging innovators featuring Elaine Matthews Engineering, I finally felt that I had truly established something meaningful, not as an extension of my family legacy, but as my own distinct achievement. The company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Defined by the very qualities that Kyle had dismissed as expensive luxuries: technical excellence, innovation, and experienced leadership. 3 months after founding Elaine Matthews Engineering, I received an invitation to the annual Automation Industry Excellence Awards. Under normal circumstances, I would have attended without hesitation. Networking at such events had always been valuable for business development. This year, however, I knew Matthews Engineering would also be represented, creating the potential for an uncomfortable first encounter with my family since my departure. After discussing it with Marcus and Jessica, I decided to attend. Hiding would only suggest weakness or shame, neither of which I felt anymore. My new company was flourishing, with the Henderson implementation proceeding smoothly and 3 additional contracts secured. If anything, I had earned the right to hold my head high among industry peers. The event was held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, a venue I knew well from years of attending similar functions as Matthews Engineering's representative. As I entered the ballroom in a new dress, I'd actually had time to shop for a small but significant change from my former workaholic lifestyle. I felt strangely calm. I mingled confidently with former clients and industry contacts, many of whom expressed admiration for my new venture. Several hinted at dissatisfaction with Matthews Engineering's recent performance, though I carefully avoided encouraging such conversations. My company would succeed on its own merits, not through disparagement of competitors, even when that competitor was my former family business. The inevitable encounter came during the pre-dinner reception. I was discussing potential collaboration with a software firm's representative when I felt a presence beside me. Turning, I found myself face to face with my father. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Elaine," he said softly. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied evenly. "If you'll excuse us, we were just discussing integration capabilities for predictive maintenance systems." "Actually, I was hoping we might speak privately," he persisted. "Just for a moment." After apologizing to my conversation partner, I followed my father to a relatively quiet corner of the ballroom. Up close, the changes in his appearance were even more apparent. He had lost weight, and his usual confident posture had diminished. "I've made a terrible mistake, Elaine," he said without preamble. "The biggest mistake of my life." I waited silently, neither encouraging nor discouraging his confession. "I should have stood up for you. I've always known how valuable you are. Not just to the company, but—" he faltered. "But to me." "Then why didn't you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. He shook his head slowly. "Weakness. Fear of conflict with your mother. Kyle's constant pressure. None of it excuses what I did." Before I could respond, my mother appeared beside him, with Kyle hovering anxiously behind her. My mother's carefully maintained appearance showed signs of strain, her makeup slightly too heavy, her smile too fixed. "Elaine," she acknowledged with a stiff nod. I see you've established yourself quickly. Yes, I replied simply. I have. Kyle tried for his usual confidence, but couldn't quite manage it. Your little startup is making some waves. Very impressive for a boutique operation. Thank you, Kyle. We focus on quality over quantity. It seems to be working well. My mother's facade cracked slightly. The Anderson contract was cancelled last month. After your departure, certain technical challenges proved insurmountable. This wasn't news to me. Industry gossip traveled fast, but hearing her admit it was nonetheless surprising. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in the company's struggles affecting innocent employees. We've had other setbacks as well, my father added, ignoring my mother's warning glance. The Henderson contract would have helped stabilize things. I imagine it would have, I acknowledged, neither apologizing for nor celebrating my company's victory in securing that contract. Kyle fidgeted with his tie, clearly uncomfortable. The thing is, Elaine, we've been discussing the possibility of collaboration. I raised an eyebrow. Collaboration? A strategic partnership, my mother clarified, her business voice firmly in place despite the personal context. Matthews Engineering has established client relationships and infrastructure. Your new firm has certain technical capabilities we currently lack. The reality suddenly became clear. They weren't just struggling, they were in serious trouble. Without my leadership, the engineering department had faltered. Without the Anderson contract, their financial position had weakened. Without the Henderson project to replace it, they were facing potential collapse. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. My father stepped forward. We want you to come back, Elaine. Not as an employee, but as a partner. Equal decision-making authority. Your name added to the company leadership. Whatever terms you want. The offer was simultaneously validating and absurd. After dismissing me as expendable, they now recognized my value only when facing the consequences of their decision. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I've established my own company now. We're doing well. We're family, my mother said, with more emotion than I'd heard from her in years. The company has always been a family legacy. A family that fired me for being too expensive. I reminded her gently. A family that decided my 12 years of contribution could be replaced by 3 inexperienced engineers. Kyle had the grace to look ashamed. I was wrong, Elaine. I was jealous of your relationship with Dad, your technical knowledge, your standing in the industry. I thought I needed to push you out to establish myself. His admission was surprisingly honest, but it came far too late. I've moved on, I told them. Elaine Matthews Engineering isn't just a name, it's a different approach to the industry. We're building something innovative, with a team that truly values technical excellence. My father looked desperate. The company might not survive without some form of intervention, Elaine. Everything I built, everything we built together, could disappear. His words struck a chord despite my determination to remain unmoved. The company did represent decades of work, including my own significant contributions. Many employees who had nothing to do with my firing would suffer if it collapsed. After a moment's consideration, I offered an alternative. I won't return or merge our companies, but I might be interested in acquiring Matthews Engineering at fair market value, with certain conditions regarding restructuring. The shock on their faces was almost comical. My mother recovered first. Acquire? You can't possibly have the capital to. I have investors who believe in my vision, I interrupted calmly. And your company's current market position likely makes the valuation quite manageable. Kyle looked like he might protest, but my father placed a restraining hand on his arm. We should discuss this more formally. Perhaps a meeting next week. My office, I specified. Tuesday at 10 a.m. As I walked away to rejoin the networking event, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, vindication, certainly, but also a surprising sense of peace. The confrontation I'd both dreaded and fantasized about had finally occurred. And I had emerged not with bitter recriminations, but with confident self-assurance. The acquisition negotiations lasted 3 weeks. My mother fought against the inevitable until financial realities forced her acceptance. The final agreement included provisions that retained most existing employees, but completely restructured leadership. With Kyle taking a non-executive role in business development where his MBA might actually prove useful. My father accepted a position as a senior technical advisor, a role that honored his foundational contributions while acknowledging the company's need for new direction. My mother chose to retire entirely, unable to accept a diminished role in the company she had helped shape. The merged entity retained the Elaine Matthews engineering name, a decision that represented both practical brand continuity and a personal acknowledgement of my journey from employee to owner. The official announcement emphasized the complementary strengths of both organizations and our commitment to technical innovation. Integration proved challenging but ultimately successful. Some cultural clashes were inevitable, but the majority of Matthews employees adapted quickly to our more collaborative approach and emphasis on engineering excellence over cost-cutting. Several expressed relief at escaping the increasingly dysfunctional environment that had developed after my departure. 6 months after the acquisition, we celebrated the successful completion of the Henderson project with a company-wide gathering. Standing before the assembled team of 43 employees, a significant growth from our original 7, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. A year ago, I believed my professional identity was inseparable from a company name that matched my own, I told them. When that connection was severed, I initially felt lost. What I've discovered since then is that our value isn't determined by our association with institutions, but by the integrity, creativity, and dedication we bring to our work. I saw my father nodding in the back row, his expression a mixture of pride and regret. Our relationship remained complicated, but we were gradually rebuilding a connection based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical family dynamics. This company isn't defined by its founder or its name, I continued. It's defined by our collective commitment to excellence. Every person in this room contributes to that identity, whether you've been here from the beginning or joined us through the acquisition. The applause that followed felt like a validation not just of my leadership, but of the fundamental truth I had discovered through adversity. True self-worth comes from within, not from external validation or family approval. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Marcus approached with 2 glasses of champagne. To the most expensive engineer who was worth every penny, he toasted with a grin. I laughed and clinked my glass against his. 2 expensive lessons that ultimately prove priceless. The journey from betrayal to rebuilding had taught me resilience I never knew I possessed. It had forced me to recognize my own value independent of family validation. Most importantly, it had shown me that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted opens the door to discovering what you truly need. The company continues to thrive under my leadership, growing in ways that would have been impossible within the constraints of my family's vision. I've established a corporate culture that values innovation over tradition, collaboration over hierarchy, and technical excellence over cost-cutting, lessons learned through the painful experience of being undervalued. As for my family relationships, they remain a work in progress. My father and I have established a new professional respect that is gradually extending into our personal interactions. My mother keeps her distance, still struggling to accept the reversal of power. Kyle and I maintain a cordial professional relationship, though the trust that was broken may never fully heal. The greatest triumph, however, isn't the successful business or the professional vindication. It's the personal growth that came from facing betrayal and choosing to rise above it rather than being defined by it. In losing my family legacy, I found my own path, one built on genuine merit rather than inherited position. Have you ever experienced betrayal from those you trusted most? How did you rebuild afterward? Share your story in the comments below. And if my journey of resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of overcoming life's unexpected challenges. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most powerful beginnings. Thank you for listening, and until next time, believe in your value even when others fail to see it.